Well, good afternoon. My name is Michael Mattmiller. I'm the Chief Technology Officer from the City of Seattle. And Georgia, do you want to?
Sure. And I'm Georgia Bullen. I'm from the Open Technology Institute at New America in DC, the think tank in DC.
So thanks for making time. I know it's the post-lunch slot, so we're all a little tired, and we're up against 18F. I think we're pretty cool, too. So we're here today to talk about a wonderful project that we in the City of Seattle are so honored to be partnering with OTI on, our interactive broadband map. So I want to take a couple minutes to give you some background on broadband in the City of Seattle. George is going to talk a bit more about the map and the work from OTI that they're doing. But really, we want to leave time for a dialogue about how we can use data to better make infrastructure decisions and better coordinate our work between our different agencies in government and across governments. So with that said, we'll get started. So the City of Seattle is a great place to live. We're a high-tech hub. We're a city that has water and mountains, and we're growing rapidly thanks to employers like Amazon and Boeing and Microsoft and a great startup community. We're also a city that's growing by 120,000 people over the next 20 years, and 75% of those people are coming to the city for tech-related jobs. So if you can imagine being the home to high-tech companies, being home to 90,000 people who are coming for tech, there's an expectation that we as a municipal government are the best and the brightest when it comes to leveraging tech to connect with our public, but also that there's a tech infrastructure in the city. And broadband is top of mind for so many of those individuals. Today in the city, we actually have really great broadband adoption. The latest Pew Internet study says that we have about 82% of our households in the city that have internet access at home. Another report that we did within the city puts that number closer to 85% as of the middle of last year. We also have pretty decent internet today. If you look at the Ookla report, we have about a 34 megabit average download speed in the city, making us 7th in the US for actual broadband experience. Now, of course, we're good technologists in Seattle, so being 7th best, number one, is not enough, and two, is not fast enough as we all look towards cities like Bristol and Chattanooga and Cedar Falls, and we get gig envy, as it were. There's also been a heightened attention to broadband, which I'm sure everyone in this room has realized, whether it's the net neutrality decision earlier this year or the FCC's decision on local choice, in which they are allowing municipal utilities to come to the FCC for relief against state laws that are limiting broadband build-outs at the municipal or other government level. So it's been in the news in Seattle that's been very resonant for our public. We've had rallies around net neutrality. We have a number of active groups who are passionate about broadband and have been pushing for an investigation of a municipal option. And so we in the city have tried to be responsive. When Mayor Murray was elected last year, he pointed out that internet access is the infrastructure challenge of the 21st century, and that we have an obligation to make sure that our public has access to the internet and the benefits it provides for the sake of improving education, economic outcomes, and job creation. So in working with the mayor, we came up with a three-pronged broadband strategy to try and improve the state of broadband in the city and drive access to more people. The first is reducing barriers. We recognized that we had a number of restrictive regulations and ordinances in the city that prevented companies from investing in us. Who here is in municipal government? A couple folks. So you can appreciate this one then. Our Department of Transportation about 5 years ago responded to complaints of telecom facilities, the boxes in the rights-of-way next to the sidewalk. The community was so incensed, our transportation department said, telecoms, you cannot put boxes in the right-of-way unless you go to 60% of homes within a 100-yard radius and get physical signatures. So that was 2008, 2009. And as you can imagine, that had a chilling effect on any telecom investment in the city. So we recognized that. We worked with providers that were our incumbents in the market. We came up with a strategy for how we hear the community but still invest in infrastructure in a way that works. And as a result of that change and some streamlining with our municipal electric utility, CenturyLink named us as one of their gig cities and started a build out in August of last year. We also modernized our cable ordinance. While internet and broadband are not regulated at the municipal level, we recognized that incenting new providers to market was going to require greater flexibility to offer triple plays and cable television services. So we modernized our code. We made it more attractive for new providers to come to market. And as a result, CenturyLink has applied and is now offering a video product over their new fiber, and we have another provider that's looking at entering the market as well. So we've had some good success on that first strategy. Second strategy, partnerships. The city of Seattle owns a lot of dark fiber. We own about 550 miles of fiber, some of that as part of a consortium with 32 other government agencies, but we do have capacity on that system. So we had an ordinance passed by our city council in 2013 that where we have spare capacity, we can lease that out to companies who want to become an ISP. It's not designed to incent the Comcasts or the CenturyLinks of the world to come in and leverage our fiber, but rather those upstarts in the city who might need that extra little capacity or that capital investment that they can leverage to be successful. And today we have 2 smaller ISPs that are serving specific neighborhoods in the city, offering, in one case, 100 megabit service and in one case, gigabit service. But so the last leg of our strategy was to study our ability to be a municipal retail broadband provider in the city. We have a history of doing big things with infrastructure. In 1902, the city of Seattle created its own electric utility and went out and built dams on the Skagit River in Washington state. And the result is today, we generate through 4 dams approximately 86% of our own energy for the city and 400,000 customers outside of our borders. And we became the nation's first carbon neutral utility about 12 years ago because of our heavy reliance on hydroelectric. So we know how to run utilities in the city. So where have we come with this strategy? Well, as you can see on the left, this is where we started last year, no homes with gigabit broadband. Today, that number is actually closer to about 140,000 homes right now, or about 45%, 50% of our households have access to gigabit service. Now, all of that, much of that is due to the build out of 2 providers, CenturyLink and Wave Broadband, who are incumbents in some portions of our city but have expanded their service. But even when those providers haven't stepped up to serve neighborhoods, we see other benefit. Comcast, when they saw this activity in our market, doubled speeds for all consumers without any additional cost. Once CenturyLink service went live 6 weeks ago, Comcast announced again that they would be increasing service by 50%. So it's good to have some healthy competition to drive market forces. But we still don't want to rely on other companies necessarily to set our destiny. We still like thinking big in Seattle, and our tech community was very supportive when we went out and studied municipal broadband. We've studied this in the past, and the costs weren't right, the time wasn't right, and we thought, hey, maybe with decreased cost of construction and fiber, we could get there this time. And what we learned is that while the cost of constructing a municipal fiber network that would touch every home in the city has gotten cheaper, it still could cost the upwards of $660 million. And to be successful, what that means is we'd have to charge subscribers about $75 a month for a standalone service. And at that rate, we would need 43% of households in the city to sign up and pay $75 a month to be cash flow positive, or really cash flow neutral. While we can look at cities like Chattanooga, which has a take rate now of reportedly, I think, 46%, or as I was just talking with Aldana about Sandy, Oregon, with a take rate of 60%, we felt 43% was a pretty tough thing to do for our city. That means that we would have to be as successful within a 3-year period as Comcast is at selling television in our city over a 25-year history. And if we couldn't be that successful, our general fund would be at risk. What that means is under Washington state law, a municipal entity can't, I'll paraphrase, enter a competitive market and operate it as a revenue utility. We could not issue bonds to build this network that were wholly backed by the anticipated revenues from the system we were going to operate. So if we were to go out and bond $660 million, they would be general obligation bonds. They would prevent us from bonding on other things like public safety or transportation. And if for some reason 43% of the city didn't sign up for our service, that means that we would have to pay off those bonds using the same funds today that we use for police officers, firefighters, and other general government services. So unfortunately, the risk of this approach was just too high at this time. We communicated this to the public. We still like the idea that in the future the city could potentially be a municipal utility, but without some different types of federal assistance or other programs, it was not the right approach for us at this time. So on the broadband front, we thought of a couple things as next steps. The first is we hired a position to better coordinate with our utilities to, again, further streamline that permitting process, make sure that companies who want to invest in Seattle knew how to do that in an efficient manner. We've also had a great time working, and I see Deb over here with Next Century Cities that has put together a great policy manual, which I have on the screen here, that talks about different things local governments, state, and the federal government can do to encourage broadband adoption and investment. But we then had this last challenge, which I think is very applicable to those in this room. We know that our public is not happy with the broadband they have, despite the fact that what limited data we have shows we have some of the best broadband in the nation. We have a public that's telling us that broadband's too expensive and is not generally available, and yet, based on all the information we have, it looks like we're cheaper on average than the nation and that 97% of our city can get a broadband connection. So we've got this real gap between the experience our people are having and the data available to us. So we have to find ways to go out and better quantify what is the broadband experience in our city, what parts of our city are having difficulty with broadband, and how do we get closer to a state where everyone has equal, affordable, and competitive gigabit broadband options. Well, you might be saying there's the National Broadband Map that NTIA has developed. And it's true, the Broadband Map is a really good resource to get a sense of what broadband looks like in a neighborhood. So when I plug in my address, I'm told that Comcast can give me a gig service, a company called Platinum Equity can give me a 10 to 25 megabit service, Integra Telecom 3 to 6, and CenturyLink 3 to 6. They got CenturyLink right. CenturyLink is available to my address for about 5 megabits. But Comcast in my neighborhood tops out at 50, and Platinum and Integra I haven't heard of. So data like this isn't necessarily actionable to individual residents in a city who care about these things. And that's when we learned about MLab. And Georgia, do you want to talk about MLab
Sure.
and OTI?
Yeah. So who has heard of Measurement Lab or MLab? I got 2, 3. Awesome. Well, Josh, you don't count. You work with us. So I'm at the, as I was saying earlier, I'm at the Open Technology Institute, which is part of New America, a think tank in DC. So Measurement Lab is actually one of our big development projects. OTI is a tech policy arm of New America. We do things like work on net neutrality and broadband access and digital equity issues. We also work on surveillance and privacy, whatnot. But we also build some technology in-house. So Measurement Lab is a partnership that we have with Google and Princeton's Planet Labs. So it's actually a global platform for internet health measurement. We sort of like to talk about it as a climate change data set related to the internet. So about how the internet is changing over time, how we understand how it's working. We actually did a study last fall using our sites within the US to look at how interconnection, so places where ISPs are connecting up to the like regional carriers, so like Cogent and Level 3. So how those connection points are impacting overall consumer experience on the internet, which resulted in a report that was cited in the net neutrality order as part of why interconnection is actually a big issue of how infrastructure works in the US. So we've got, I think we're at like 88 servers, 88 sites worldwide where we have 4 to 6 servers at each of those locations where people, when you run a test, it runs through those locations. And one of the things that makes us a little bit different than, say, if you were to go to speedtest.net is that the test that you're running with us is normalized over the whole internet and actually reflects what it's like to get to content online, as opposed to the way speedtest.net works is connecting you to your closest location of your ISP. So it's sort of giving you your best case scenario of how your ISP responds to your internet request. So we've got this platform out there. We have a lot of data, and like one of our big goals for the year is to get people better access to this data. So in talking with Michael, we were able to start this project, which we'll get into more. But the basic idea is you can pull from, we're building out a platform that lets you pull out a geographic subset of our data and then start to map that however you want to map that. So for Seattle, we've been working with census blocks and council districts you can turn on and look at. And we then have the data over time of how, what speeds people are actually getting through like the history of whatever data we have. So at the moment we have 2014 and 2015 up on the site. So initially the MLab data is not as geographically accurate as probably many of you want for your analysis. So one of the features that we've been building into this tool is that when people run it, they'll actually use HTML5 on their browser to get a better geolocation data, which then Seattle has. It doesn't publish back to our big open data set because we don't want to have that be a risk of having your IP address and someone's actual location in a giant public data set that's available freely for people to work with. So instead, we have that, which allows us to then aggregate it more accurately on the map, but that's something that stays with Seattle. They can have it be in their privacy policies. They can publish at the census block level. So we've sort of worked out a process for that where we can maintain people's privacy but get better data about what actual internet experience they're having at their house or wherever they're running the test from. So I think we can show the map unless, yeah, the other thing that we're doing as part of this, I guess I should escape out, right? And then there. So the other thing that we're doing as part of this is when people run a test, so this starts on October, so it defaults you to the current time. So because it's October 1st, there's no data yet for October because it hasn't run overnight yet to pull the data. But so here we can start to see what the median speeds are in a census block in the last month. So we're aggregating by month and then publishing that out. We also are producing an open data feed, which Seattle's going to host as part of their open data platform. So in their Socrata instance, that's something that we're working out actually like this week and next with Open Data Manager, Bruce. And yeah, so when people run a test, so right now it tells us we're on 10th Street in Oakland. I can hit this to run. So we won't see this show up on the map right now. And obviously we're in Oakland, so it's not going to show up on this map, but it contributes to the data set. After people run a test, they're asked to fill out a survey about what they're paying and what their advertised speeds are. So we're also starting to collect a data set that can let us see, are people getting anything close to what they think they're supposed to be getting and what they think they're paying. So it'll be crowdsourced, but at least it's somewhere to start from. So yeah, so then they get this little survey. So they can tell us whether they're at work or at home, what type of connection they think they're on. And obviously, since it's crowdsourced, people might get this wrong, but it's at least something for us to start to be able to analyze when we have a significant amount of data, and then how much they're paying and what they're supposed to be getting. Yeah, so it's pretty simple, actually, I think. But one of the things that we're really excited about, and especially with many of you that are here, is the opportunity that this presents for multiple municipalities to do a similar study, because then we can start to generate data. OTI has put out a report for the last 4 years called the Cost of Connectivity, where we've done a lot of just manual data collection of what is the advertised price that people have in different cities. We do that for 25 cities around the world. I'm looking at Josh, something like that. But one of our hopes with doing something like this is we can actually have instances of this platform running in a number of places and actually collect data of not just what Comcast is offering at a price, but actually what people are paying, since there's lots of, people will say like negotiating back to the what do you call it? When people get a special deal in their promotional price, that's the word. Lots of times people negotiate promotional prices. We don't see those when we're collecting the data for that study. So this is an opportunity for us to actually understand what people are getting, what that looks like versus what they've been offered and advertised. So I think that's it for talking about it. I don't know. We sort of open it up to questions and conversation.
I guess just one thing to close on the map. Yeah. So it's been really wonderful working with OTI and talking with them about our policy objectives about trying to get clarity into broadband performance around the city. The interesting questions that we have now as we're getting ready to launch this, you can see we've got some data in the map, but we're hoping that when we announce it officially in about the next 2 weeks, that we can really color the map and make sure we understand the broadband experience in every neighborhood. But we're trying to work on the framing right now with our mayor's office and think about what are we going to do with all this data. So we know there's a lot of interest. On one hand, we'd love to be able to go to our incumbent providers and say, hey, here's where you're missing the mark in providing service, which we think there's going to be some value there. We're also trying to think about how we begin to service those neighborhoods where we do see lower broadband experiences. Because simply having a red section of this map, like for example, Georgia picked on this neighborhood right here, where if you can't read the very tiny print, they have the menial experience of a 1 megabit download and a 0 megabit upload. It's actually the industrial part of our city, so there probably aren't many homes there. And there's some other considerations. But it's not necessarily that we have to get additional wireline broadband service into those neighborhoods. It could be that neighborhoods, or that the people in those neighborhoods legitimately are not signing up for higher broadband services. CenturyLink in our city still offers an entry broadband speed of 1.5 megabits per second. Now, through this data, we hope that people answer the crowdsourcing questions accurately, and we can get a sense of, are people really just not signing up for faster service in those neighborhoods? And then if we believe that that is a policy issue, if we believe that a neighborhood legitimately is not getting the speeds they need to participate in our society, what are the other forms of intervention that we can exercise to improve the broadband experience without going and stringing more fiber on our utility poles? One of the ways we're thinking about that, for example, is that our Seattle Public Library received a grant from Google to have Verizon MiFi hotspots so that can be checked out from the library. Today there's 150 of them. They are in very high demand, as you can imagine. And we're collecting some data about where those hotspots are being checked out and what neighborhoods, and we survey on how they're being used. We do hear from Verizon that there's a lot of Netflix watching on them, which may not have the best academic outcomes, but hey, it's driving adoption. In the mayor's budget that went to council this week, he asked for funding to take that number of hotspots from 150 to 600. So as we get this data, one potential use could be thinking about how do we locate those MiFi hotspots at the library branches throughout the city where we have the greatest need. So we are looking at those ways that this data will be useful beyond just being a curmudgeon to our telecom providers. But so that's where we are today. I guess, Georgia, to your point, we thought we'd really open the floor up to questions and think about what are the broadband challenges folks are having and how you're using data as you pursue your efforts. And maybe to incent conversation, Aldana, can I put you on the spot since you just mentioned something interesting about an hour ago about Lexington's efforts?
Well, we've been at this for about a year. We don't own a utility. We're not small enough to do the bonding and not large enough to actually have a Google swoop in and tell us that they're going to build it for us. We don't fit their economic model. So we're in that middle space, and we've done a request for information, which at least in Kentucky has no legal binding, so we're open to conversations. We've looked at everything from building it ourselves to public-private partnerships to actually have some other providers come and say, we would like to come into your community. We've had some of everything. Looking at the bonding ourselves is very difficult for us because it's the same issues that you just mentioned. In other words, can we do revenue bonds? And if they're revenue bonds, by the way, Moody's has a white paper out. If you haven't seen it, you ought to get it and read it because it speaks pretty dismally of municipal built infrastructure where you tend to get not the uptake, and you can't pay basically for the revenue bonds that you've issued. Not only that, but we would have the same issue that we would crowd out any other bonding that the city would want to do. So that is probably something that is, I think, not going to be in our future, although, let's put it this way, we have not totally ruled it out. We have an additional interesting thing happening in our state, and that is our state is building out a middle mile. And that middle mile is actually going to begin around Lexington. We know that for a fact because we're actually issuing permits to the company that will do the digging and the trenching. There is an opportunity for us to take advantage of that and put some fiber in there for the city's use, which I think we will be pursuing. But that is not necessarily going to provide us with what our mayor wants to do, which is provide fiber to the home and build out within our urban city and county. So that's where we're at. We will have a recommendation to our mayor by the end of the year.
That's great. Aldana, I'm curious, as you're making those decisions, do you find that there's data available to help you understand the internet experience in Lexington?
I think that there's probably not enough data yet, in other words, to understand it. I think we understand our city. Our city, we basically speak of ourselves not only for our basketball, but also as university cities, as a city which has participated in the horse industry. We're an international city, and I tell people that, just recently we did a broadband communities conference in Lexington, but at the same time our horse sales and horse auctions were going on. And within 10 days, we auctioned $280 million worth of horses. So it is a huge endeavor for a fairly middle-sized city. So we are international. I think that there is an interest in demanding that as a service in the city.
A couple of questions. You're doing this only for wired, or I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. You're doing this only for wired, or are you doing also mobile access?
So you can run the test from any device, and we'll be able to see some of, like, based on the carrier, based on the ISP and how that maps, we'll know a little bit about whether it's mobile or wired.
Okay. And the other question is, you mentioned that you have about 88 sites and you have servers in each. This covers the U.S.
Globally, actually.
Globally.
So we actually, through some of our other partnerships, we work with the Canadian Regulatory Agency. We're working with Thailand right now.
Really?
We work with Greece. And
so we can use you in Saudi Arabia if we choose.
You can, yeah. We actually, we were emailing with someone in, not in Saudi Arabia, but at Etisalat about them becoming a site host as well. So we're working on actively building out some of where we have more sites so that we have a good balance of how traffic gets routed to different test sites.
Yeah, because part of the broadband equity is reaching out to the outer villages and sites where you want to have more internet access to empower them. You will be able to do that.
Yeah, so we actually, so like we have a site right now in Tunisia, and the Tunisian Internet Regulatory Agency, which it's like ICT is the acronym, which is not helpful, but they're thinking about doing a quality of service study, and so we're talking about how we would support them by potentially having a couple more measurement points, so that they can get a sense of how the internet is in more portions of the country. Right now we just have one site there, but we might build out a couple more as part of supporting them doing a study.
Thank you.
So we're very open to partnerships like that. It's helpful for all of us.
And I should point out to the question about device. So the map does degrade nicely to your.
Yeah.
The map degrades nicely to a mobile device.
We've been making sure that there's good mobile support for this platform, and we have a couple of other we get a lot of data from integrations with other software. So there's various different software products that when you decide what your network settings should be, they actually run a couple of tests to measurement labs. So we get 150,000 to 200,000 tests daily globally about the state of the internet. So this is sort of what we're aiming to do with projects and this collaboration with Seattle is make sure that we're getting it at a more local scale so that it can help be useful for questions like what Seattle should do. Yeah.
So you guys have 82% broadband adoption in the home, so that's 18% of people do not have broadband in the home or are not adopting broadband in the home. So is there an opportunity with this data, which relies on using the internet to offer the data, to learn about that 18% and how to, address the gap?
That's a great question, and we're very fortunate in the city that we produce a quadrennial technology indicators report, as we call it. And if you go out to our website, seattle.gov/tech, it'll be linked right there for download. And it's a fascinating data set for anyone who looks at technology trends. What we learned is, compared to that Pew statistic out there, we learned about 15% of our homes in the city do not have broadband access within the home. Again, that's different than the availability, where we know 97% of homes in Seattle do have access should they choose to take it. When we look at those homes that do not have internet, the data tells us what we might expect. Refugees, immigrants, those of lower income levels are the households that are overrepresented in the population that does not have internet access at home. But the interesting thing is the why. When we look at that same population, and I apologize, I can't remember the metric off the top of my head, a large number of those households do have a Wi-Fi capable device. It could be a smartphone, a tablet, but those households are not subscribing to data plans. So we do have some anecdotal information that the cost of data plans is prohibitive. We have some anecdotal information that it's too hard to sign up for lower income or discounted internet access. For example, Comcast offers a $9.99 internet plan. However, the application process is lengthy. You have to evidence that you're a household with a child participating in free or reduced school lunches. And then let's say you get through that, you still have to be home when they roll a truck for that 2 to who knows how many hour window when it takes for them to come set up your service. So we are trying to better understand those barriers. And specifically in Seattle, we kicked off what we called our Digital Equity Initiative earlier this year. We recognized that the metrics and the strategies we were using to close the digital divide are quite dated at this point. and that we hadn't gone out to the community in almost 15 years to ask where as a society we want to be when it comes to consistent levels of internet access and technology skills adoption. So we have convened a panel of about 25 people, and in fact I see Catherine Neal, who is on that panel.
I'm missing the panel today because I'm here.
Oh, I hear it's going well, actually. I just got a text from Kendi. So these are people in the tech community, in the telecom community, funders, community leaders, those from social services, to think about how we envision goals for where we want to be in closing that 15% divide, and then what are the strategies that get us there. So on that same website, seattle.gov/tech, we have our phase 1 report, which has the 6 goals the community has proposed and a number of strategies to get us there. Now we're trying to hone that down to what's most actionable and impactful, and then we'll focus on delivering those.
So I love this, and as a citizen of Seattle, I have a question in terms of just empowering citizen engagement, because I can imagine if I used this and I found out thought I was paying for something and I wasn't getting it, which may be a common occurrence, I would probably get on the phone to my provider and complain. I've heard anecdotally that people can do that, and then miraculously your speed gets boosted. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if there's any way you could try and capture a feedback of a citizen, even adding, that thank you for this tool, I used this and my speed went up, that this actually affected change. So as another means of maybe pressuring the telecommunications companies.
I love that idea. George, what were you going to?
We can do that. I mean, we can do it. It's sort of a question of, I would say that's more of a political question than a data technical question.
Well, it's an interesting point of where crowdsourcing is going. And this is really one of the first attempts we have in the city at crowdsourcing at a large scale for consistent analytic type data. And I'd love to see that type of feedback captured. One thing we can do in a more systemic manner is, I forgot to point out this slider down at the bottom of the screen, which is, as we use this map and we capture data over a period of time, we'll be able to see trends about how internet performs. And so we would hope to see that if people are calling and complaining, we'll see more and more green areas. The other thing that is not reflected on this map, but Georgia pointed out that MLab collects a whole host of variables and produces a number of visualizations, like what time of day do we see consistent changes in speeds, how do we break down by specific providers. It wasn't on that crowdsourcing form you saw, but we do capture in the back end through your IP who your ISP is, so that is another data point on which we can pivot the data.
Yeah, so one of the things that I have prototypes of on my laptop, if you want to see them, are some charts that we'll be able to see like how many samples we're getting from different ISPs, what the median speeds are by ISP, so sort of different slices of the same data set. We'll also theoretically be able to start to see where ISPs actually are in the city, since we'll know where at each test what ISP it was run across and then what the speed was and where it is. Yeah, when we start getting more tests. Yeah, we can get lots of interesting data if you aggregate by council district.
Yes.
Much larger polygons make it easier to show coverage.
So you mentioned earlier that when you were investigating municipal broadband options, that there were some state restrictions that were problematic for you. Is there any momentum at the state legislature to help remove those barriers so that you don't have to petition the FCC for relief? And can this data be used to help build that momentum?
It's a great question, and one of the ways the map first entered our mind is we were having a meeting with Washington State Legislator Zachary Hudgens last year. When we were first having meetings to talk about potential barriers we would face if we decided to pursue a municipal broadband option, and he was one of the first folks to say, this all sounds great, but I need data if I'm going to go out there and try and change laws. And he very much recommended a map, and was one of the reasons we went down this path. When we look at the barriers in Washington State from a legislative perspective, we do not have a law in Washington that says what we would call a first-class municipality, according to the language of our Constitution, is prohibited from operating a telecom utility. And quite the opposite. It was in 2003 that the city of Edmonds, Washington, sought an opinion from our Attorney General, who confirmed that, yeah, a municipality can absolutely go do this. It's within their rights to sell broadband or telephone service or whatever that might be. The legal challenges we have to do with financing. So we have that, and again, I'm unfortunately not the lawyer in the room, but to paraphrase, for us to go out and be a municipal broadband provider, we would want to issue revenue bonds so that we could protect the utility and its success from impacting the rest of general government. And because we would not be entering an environment with 0% risk of repayment of the bonds, we could not issue revenue bonds. So that's the biggest hindrance we have. The second biggest hindrance from the state level is the Washington State Accountancy Act, which says that any money that is being spent on the broadband utility must be repaid by the ratepayers of the broadband utility, so we can't cross-subsidize. There's some conversation there about our owning a municipal electric utility with its own wires and poles and touching every house in the city with its own call center, that we could figure out some way to leverage some of those assets. But the reality from an accounting perspective is that there could be very little split costs due to state law. We also have a legal challenge in that our utility poles used by our electric utility are 60% co-owned with CenturyLink. So we could very well face the prospect of CenturyLink saying you can't use our assets to compete against us. And we aren't sure our success in fighting that argument.
So how are you working to get, especially when you partner with a city specifically, how are you working with Seattle to get more tests? Because I'm interested since, the more tests you get, obviously, the richer this tool will be, but it also seems like an opportunity for community engagement around this issue, like a call to action, which is, I think, something sort of missing from this field, like that idea of like that micro level action that residents can take to like bridge the digital divide. So
yeah, so that's sort of part of you guys have that as part of your plan, right? Yeah.
That is, we're working on the engagement plan right now. We'll do the standard press release and put it on our website, but our intent is to work with our Department of Neighborhoods to make sure that those community members who would be passionate about this learn about it, work with our educational institutions like the University of Washington that has a vested interest in getting this data, can help us socialize and leverage their networks. Frankly, part of the answer is also our Code for Seattle, or Open Seattle Brigade, who is very passionate about this. And I actually went to them back in January of this year and pitched this idea, and they came up with several options before they realized we could bring in OTI to help with the heavy lift.
Yeah, and we've been working with them. A bunch of the work started at a hackathon in Seattle back in April, and then they helped like shepherd some of the requirements, and we've been helping like get it to the finish line. But the idea is to sort of come back to working with them to maintain it and start pushing on some of that outreach. Yeah, there's with some of the other communities that we're working with and some other like research groups, they're actually planning they'll use the tools, but they're going to structure basically a study where they'll send people out to different locations and have them run tests on multiple providers in a structured way. So they're actually going to, we're working with some people who are thinking about how to do that in various places in Southeast Asia, where they'll use an app. We've been also working on some browser extensions and things that can be ported to Android and iOS as a phone app to be able to do data collection from a variety of different devices in different places, and then have that as data that is collected in more of a structured manner. So lots of ways.
We haven't done the testing yet to see, for instance, what the speeds might be in various districts. But that is something that definitely I think we would like to do. But let me just talk about how to get some engagement. And we believe that one of the first things that we've done, and we did it last year already, is sort of announced it to our city council about what we're planning to do, what we hope we can do, and got a lot of support. Now there is additional support that we're trying to figure out when to unleash it, and that is the social media. Mm-hmm. But I think that one of the things that, and by the way, we've done it for gatherings and meetings on Twitter, and we've done it with Facebook advertising, and that I think is another one of those opportunities, because it is very much at the ground roots level in how you might be able to actually marshal the forces that you need, because we are not nearly at that adoption rate as you indicate. But I think with everything going on with our middle mile and what we're trying to do in the city, I think that there's a real great opportunity.
That's great.
The other thing I'll say is one of the challenges we have as an overall platform is obviously people want to go test their internet when they're having a problem. It's like, oh crap, what's not working? I'll go check this thing. How fast is my internet right now? And they'll go look it up. And one of the things we're trying to do, especially with initiatives like this with the city of Seattle, is have more data that's collected not in times of anger. So we don't just want to know, like if everybody goes and tests when there's a problem, that actually just sort of adds to the problem. It's like a traffic jam, right? Like when you see the traffic jam, sometimes the best solution is to not get on the road, like go a different way. And that's, so we want to just collect more, better data about when, about normal conditions. So we've been talking about campaigns that are along the lines of, how many people click a link every day to donate, to put money to donate towards animals and, like hunger issues, right? Those like banners that you see across the top of sites. Like, could we be doing something similar about internet citizen engagement? Click this link to contribute to the speed data, and we'll just do that every day, like some incentive to do that every day. And so having stuff where you get people to use this as your source point for data, like, oh, how is it today? How is it tomorrow? Then we can start to get more regular tests. So that's one of the things that in our browser extension that we're working on, we actually allow you to schedule the test to run daily. So you can have it like actually just run it in the background every morning or like randomly throughout the day.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's coming soon. It's one of our other projects.
Yeah, I'm with Kansas City Digital Drive, so we have Google Fiber, and as a nonprofit, we believe that fiber is the infrastructure of the future, is the preferable one. And just thinking about your community engagement, we have, what's interesting about this is it measures speed, right? And speed is a benefit of fiber, clearly, but a lot of people don't understand, why is speed important? And just this one kind of random case study that we had, it turns out we have a really great film community in Kansas City that I didn't really know about that much, but some friends of mine are in it, and we've become involved in it. And we did a dueling city film project with Chattanooga to see who could create crowdsourced videos and then upload them quickly as a way to demonstrate the benefits of fiber to the wider creative community.
Yeah.
So you could maybe do something like that. It's called Capture, and we're looking to expand. So if you want to jump on the Capture bandwagon, that would be awesome. But these people, they see direct benefit to speed in the work they do, and it makes them competitive with people in Hollywood, in traditional filmmaking areas of the industry where they do not have this amount of speed. So this one shop did a video for a Swedish death metal band and something like that, and they needed the band needed them to put fire into the video. Like, can you send this back to us, but with more fire? So they were able to turn around this video production work just like in minutes when it would have taken people on the coast hours to do. Right. So I guess my rambling point is, your creative community and the people who really need speed can be advocates for fiber, and they can produce really compelling storytelling for you in making your case to the community.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I'm going to go back to our Office of Arts and Culture and talk about the Swedish metal band fire competition. That'd be great.
When you mentioned the National Broadband Map, did you find that data to be pretty much useless for your purposes? I mean, how accurate is that? Because I've looked at that too, and I really wondered, is it, for generalizations, is it accurate enough, or is it really, when you started to look at what it showed versus what was on the ground, that it didn't provide any kind of value, or does it actually provide value?
Yeah. I know there are folks from the NTIA here. Not necessarily in this room, but at the conference. I would say that the National Broadband Map, my sense is that it had, a really great ability to draw attention to the state of affairs, and in many cases provided great value in looking at the state of internet when it went live. For us and for our public in Seattle, which is more tech-driven, which is more, I don't know if demanding is the right word, but wanting more precise data, the National Broadband Map was not meeting our needs. So I think that there's a room for the National Broadband Map and other efforts to get a better sense of precisely where providers are offering service, precisely what the broadband experience is, and I think that comes from crowdsourcing as well as from other types of tools that the Broadband Map just can't provide.
Yeah, and I will say I've heard rumor of a Broadband Map 2.0. Don't quote me on that, but I've heard that might be happening. I know that, within the FCC, a lot of the work that the CIO's office is pushing, they've been doing a lot of upgrading of their databases and resources, so I think we probably will start seeing more from them soon. I don't know. And one of the challenges that they have is I think a lot of that data, and again, I might be wrong, so someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think the data that's there is mostly from like 2012 and is mostly from forms that are reported to the NTIA and the FCC. So a lot of it isn't actually like accurately measured and tested. It's not being collected in other ways. It's coming from the forms that are self-reported. So, and I mean, for most of the data you can get back out like through the API. It's at the county level, which just isn't granular enough for a lot of the like planning and engagement work that any of you in the room want to do. So it's hard. We've used it a lot to try and study it, and it's just, you know, it's not at the level of granularity. It's not at the level of like accuracy that's useful to work with, especially at the city level. Yeah. But I believe there's more coming from them. Not sure. Yeah.
Well, great. What I'll do real quick is put our contact information on the screen. And so would be happy to send anyone in the room the details of our Seattle broadband study. And I know Georgia would love to talk with folks interested about bringing the broadband map to their city. And if there's no more questions, I want to thank everyone for coming today, and we'll hang out here if anyone wants to keep talking. So thank you.
Thanks.